Hello everyone, welcome to Poetry Day 3, and I have a brand new lesson to teach you. Today I want to teach you that poets use imagery to make you see, hear, and feel things. And we're going to be learning exactly what imagery is today. So to do this, we're going to be reading a couple poems, and the first poem we're going to read is called Welcome to the Night. So let's go ahead and read the poem. Welcome to the night. To all of you who crawl and creep, who buzz and chirp and hoot and peep, who wake at dusk and throw off sleep, welcome to the night. To you who make the forest sing, who dip and dodge on silent wing, who flutter, hover, clasp, and cling, welcome to the night. Come feel the cool and shadowed breeze. Come smell your way among the trees. Come touch rough bark and leathered leaves. Welcome to the night. The night's a sea of dappled dark. The night's a feast of sound and spark. The night's a wild, enchanted park. Welcome to the night. So, what did you imagine while I read this poem? And which senses did the poet address or use? When I'm talking about your senses, I'm talking about sight, taste, touch, hear, smell, all of those things. And imagery, that's simply us creating pictures in our mind, but using those senses. The author, he was using our sense of sight, he was using our sense of hearing or sounds and our sense of touch. And when he did this, I was able to imagine the owl's flexible head. I was able to imagine the sounds the insects and the animals were making in the night. And I was able to imagine touching the bark and the leaves. I was able to imagine all of this simply by reading this poem, but it didn't happen on accident. The author used imagery. And here are some examples of some things he did to create that imagery. He used sound words like buzz, chirp, hoot, and peep. And when he used that imagery, I was able to imagine the owl's flexible head because of the word hoot. I was able to imagine all the different sounds that the animals were making because of all of these other sound words. He used describing words like rough and leathered, and I was able to imagine how the bark and the leaves would feel if I touched them. Let's look at some more examples of imagery. Now I have the poem Snail at Moonrise, and I want you to think about these following questions while I read. What did you see in your mind as I read this poem? What texture did the poet help you feel? How did the poet help you imagine seeing or touching something? Snail at Moonrise. Each night, Snail unhooks himself from earth, climbs a slick trail of silver, up, up, the horizon of log, up stems of leaves to their dewy tips, seeking, with his tiny sandpaper tongue, morsels of green to mix in his dark, moist body and spin into whirls of light. Shell maker, moon maker, gleaming silver bright, each night, darkness into light. So before I move on to my chart, I want to look at a couple lines in this poem. I have the line, the horizon of log. Now, if I'm reading that just as it is, the horizon of log, that may not make as much sense to me just initially looking at it. But then I could use my knowledge of metaphors and I realize, oh, I know some words right here. I know what a log is. That's like a big part of a tree that's been cut down. And I know what a horizon is. That's when I'm looking out towards the sky to the very edge where the sun is. So I know what they are separately. And now he's using his knowledge of metaphors to compare this word. He's comparing a horizon to a log. Well, when I think about a horizon, I think about something that's long and vast. And if he's comparing the horizon to the log, maybe from the snail's perspective, this log is like a vast horizon. I also want to come down and look at tiny sandpaper tongue. The author could have just said that the snail had a rough tongue, but he's using an image of something that you already know, sandpaper. When you think about sandpaper and you think about touching sandpaper, I immediately think of my skin getting nicked and roughed up. He's using the image of sandpaper to give us a better visual of exactly what the snail's tongue would feel like. Let's go ahead and look at our chart. So we have sights, a shiny tail, a long log. I'm sorry, a shiny trail, a long log, and touch, a rough tongue. So now I want to know what the poet did to create this imagery up here. Remember, the imagery, these are all the things that I'm imagining. And these are the techniques the poet is using to create the imagery. So one, the poet described the trail as slick and silver. So I immediately know that trail is slippery. That trail is probably shiny because he's using the word silver here. So I imagine like a glistening, slimy looking trail. He compared the log to a horizon. So again, I know that I'm thinking like from the snail's perspective, I'm thinking of something vast and wide. And then earlier I mentioned that he compared the snail's tongue to sandpaper. So again, there are lots of different ways to create imagery. We saw the poet use sound words. We saw that he compared two unlike things. And we saw him simply use descriptive words. So for homework today, just like before, you have an assignment posted under Poetry Day 3. You're going to go ahead and go into Google Class. I'm going into Google Docs since that's where I have it posted for me. So day 1, you looked at a lyrical poem. Day 2, you were looking at the white space and the line breaks. And day 3, you're going to give me some examples of imagery that you find in a poem that I'm going to be listing here later on. You'll have to tell me if it's an example of sight, sound, or touch, and exactly what was being imagined. And then you're going to have to say exactly what the poet did to create that imagery. Your other assignment, after you finish reading this poem, I want you to create a drawing of all the things you imagined while you were reading this poem. Now, I know we're not in person, so obviously, if you aren't able to send a picture, that is perfectly fine. I will be really excited to see your picture when we get back to school. All other assignments posted on here today are simply for Kahoot, and just other various websites that I want you to check out. Make sure you get at least 20 minutes on iReady Reading today, and have a fantastic day, guys.